Good day, everyone. This is Cherry Mae Gaitera from BE Ed 2, Section A. So, for today's video, we will discuss two lessons. First is Ausubel's meaningful verbal learning or subsumption theory, and second is transfer of learning. So, first, let's talk about Ausubel's meaningful learning. So, let's discuss first Ausubel's meaningful verbal learning or subsumption theory. So I have here the diagram of Ausubel's subsumption theory. So there are three parts: meaningful reception of information, process for meaningful learning, advanced organizers. So those three are the things that we have to learn in this theory. So under meaningful reception of information are learner's cognitive structure, use of advanced graphic organizer, and subsumption. So for process for meaningful learning, there are four: derivative subsumption, correlative subsumption, superordinate learning, and combinatorial learning. So for advanced organizers, there are four also: expository, narrative, scheming, and graphic organizers. So those are the things that we needed to learn in this theory. Learning is a term that has been studied in the field of education and psychology over the years. Following these studies, different theories related to human learning and the various ways in which the brain learns have emerged. Still, before continuing, we must define the meaning of the learning concept. We can define learning as the lasting acquisition of knowledge, behaviors, skills, or abilities through practice, study, or experience. In the same way, learning is a natural and continuous process that we carry out daily throughout our lives. There are several types of learning, including meaningful learning, based on the theory of meaningful learning by American psychologist David Ausubel. So let's know first, who is David Ausubel? David Ausubel was a constructivist psychologist and pedagogy. He was born in New York on October 25, 1918. Studied psychology at the University of Pennsylvania and medicine at the University of Middlesex. He was the creator of the theory of meaningful learning, which is part of the constructivist current as relational learning. So, what is meaningful learning? Meaningful learning was a term developed during the 1960s and is within the constructivist current. It differs from rote learning in that a connection is obtained between the previous knowledge of the students and the newly acquired knowledge. Rote learning consists of memorizing concepts without the need for understanding. So it's all about memorizing without comprehension. Meaningful learning allows students to associate acquired material with previous knowledge or experiences that serve as an anchor when obtaining new knowledge. This will enable the students to make connections that will allow learning to be a comprehensive and lasting one throughout their life. Now, let's know the types of meaningful learning. There are three types of meaningful learning, all make up the process of obtaining lasting knowledge and connect it to prior knowledge. So first is representation learning. It is the elementary learning on which other learning depends. It is based on learning symbols and words. Concept learning is produced as the vocabulary of the students expands. It is the learning of words or concepts. It can be acquired through the discovery or instruction of the teacher. Proposition learning means the union of previous learning. The image is associated with the word and its meaning so that an expressed idea is generated. So, there are educational implications of meaningful learning. The teacher needs to have in mind the previous knowledge of the students before starting to impart new material. In this way, you can make use of symbols, phrases, concepts, images, ideas, and propositions that connect with new knowledge. Through these connections, students will have the opportunity to associate their previous knowledge with the new concepts taught in the classroom. Through these connections, the acquired knowledge will be stored in long-term memory, causing personalized and constant learning. Student motivation is essential to obtain meaningful learning. This is why the teacher must use examples during the instruction of new material, having in mind the student's previous knowledge. The use of resources and materials that facilitate this type of learning is also recommended. The quintessential of subsumption theory. As opposed to many other instructional theories, which are psychology-based models applied to instructional design, the subsumption theory was originally developed exclusively for instructional design. It describes a way of creating instructional material that helps learners to organize their content in order to make it meaningful for transfer. The goal here is for learners to have the necessary background that will help them solve any problem and also retain this knowledge. According to the concept set forth by Ausubel, the acquisition of knowledge is based on the actual process that occurs during learning. The key process that takes place in the learner's brain is subsumption, wherein new content is related to relative ideas that are already present in the existing cognitive structure on a non-verbatim basis. Cognitive structures are what's left in the human brain from all the learning experiences, after forgetting inevitably occurs. So when some details, facts, or situations lose their individual nature, they are then integrated into a general notion. There are four types of subsumption theory: correlative subsumption, derivative subsumption, superordinate subsumption, and combinatorial learning. Derivative subsumption describes the situation in which the new information learned is an example of a concept that you have already learned. Correlative subsumption is the higher level concept of thinking. Superordinate subsumption describes the situation in which the new information learned is an example of a concept that you have already learned. Combinatorial learning, when the newly acquired knowledge combines with prior knowledge to enrich the understanding of both concepts. So there are types of advanced organizers. First is graphic organizers. Structure information visually or in pictures. They're usually one-page forms with lots of blank areas, so they're easy for students to skim before the lesson.
So I have here an example of graphic organizer. A concept map is a type of graphic organizer that helps users organize and represent knowledge of a subject. Concept maps begin with the main idea or concept and then branch out to show how that main idea can be broken down into specific topics.
The concept map is very close to the idea web. This type of graphic organizer can evaluate one specific topic rather than two or more topics simultaneously. Spider Map Graphic Organizer. The spider map's purpose is to define a main topic with specific descriptive connections. A basic spider diagram starts with the main idea or topic in the center circle, with all subordinate ideas branching off of it. To add more details, you can further investigate certain aspects, make connections between ideas, and fill in the gap. This type of organizational chart is typically very diverse and detailed. It is ideally suited for individual use done for infographic or presentation purposes. Next is expository. Expository advanced organizers give students a broad idea of the lesson's purpose before the lesson begins.
For example, a teacher may tell students what the lesson's goals are. We've talked about what habitats are and why some animals prefer to live in different places than other animals do. Our goal today is to learn about the 4 layers of tropical rainforest and which animals live in each of those different layers. Teachers often also write the goals on the board.
While narrative, it involves storytelling. At the beginning of the class, the teacher might tell an interesting story that relates to important concepts in the lesson.
For example, the teacher will say, I am going to tell you a story about a little tree frog who climbed from the forest floor up to the very top of the tallest tree in the rainforest.
Lastly is scheming. It is another type of advanced organizer. A teacher may ask students to skim over reading, focusing on highlighted information such as captions or chapter headings and concept map.
That makes them familiar with the material before they read it more thoroughly. Younger students might take a picture walk through the reading.
So that's the end of my report about Ausubel's meaningful verbal learning or subsumption theory. So I hope you learned something about my discussion. So now let's move on to the second lesson, which is transfer of learning. Historically, the concept of transfer of learning lay squarely within the applied instructional arena of education. What is transfer of learning? Transfer of learning means the use of previously acquired knowledge and skills in new learning or problem solving situations. The transfer phenomenon is presented within a general perspective of learning. Newly acquired knowledge structures need consolidation in order to be transferred, and non cognitive aspects of learning, such as social, emotional, and motivational, need particular consideration in the original learning process. Transfer of learning occurs when learning in one context enhances. Positive transfer or undermines negative transfer or related performance in another context. Transfer is crucial to education, which generally aspires to impact on contexts quite different from the context of learning. Research on transfer argues that very often transfer does not occur, especially for transfer. So I have here 7 important factors that may affect the learning process. First is intellectual factor. The term refers to the individual mental level. Success in school is generally closely related to level of the intellect. Second, learning factors. Factors owing to lack of mastery of what has been taught, faulty methods of work or study, and narrowness of experimental background may affect the learning process of any pupil. Third, physical factors. Under this group are included such factors as health, physical development, nutrition, visual and physical defects, and glandular abnormality. Children suffering from visual, auditory, and other physical defects are seriously handicapped in developing skills such as reading and spelling. Fourth is mental factors. Attitude falls under mental factors. Attitudes are made up of organic and kinesthetic elements. They are not to be confused with emotions that are characterized by internal visceral disturbances. Attitudes are more or less of definite sort. Fifth is emotional and social factors. Personal factors such as instincts and emotions, and social factors such as cooperation and rivalry are directly related to a complex psychology of motivation. Sixth, teacher's personality. The teacher as an individual personality is an important element in the learning environment or in the failures and success of the learner. 7. Environmental factor. Physical conditions needed for learning is under environmental factor. One of the factors that affect the efficiency of learning is the condition in which learning takes place. In the school and at the home, the conditions for learning must be favorable and adequate if teaching is to produce the desired result. So those are the 7 factors that affects the learning of the children. Next is applying the principles of transfer of learning in facilitating. First, focus on the relevance of what you're learning. Research shows that when learning is relevant, students are able to connect what they're learning to what they already know and build new neural connections and long-term memory storage. So if you want your learning to be engaging and to be able to remember it in other contexts, it's important to establish relevance early on. Think about how you might apply what you're learning today in your future job or everyday life and then try to tie it to some of your short or long-term goals. For instance, if one of your long-term goals is to land a job in IT, focusing on how your course will help you reach that goal can make even the most tedious study materials seem more engaging because you understand that it is important to your future goals. Second, take time to reflect and self-explain. Before you can transfer knowledge to new contexts, you need to understand the concept inside and out, which is why it's important to take time for reflection and self-explanation. Research shows that self-explanation can help you to identify any incorrect assumptions, lead to a deeper understanding of the material, and ultimately promote knowledge transfer. So when you're learning about something that's completely new to you, take a moment to think about how you would explain it in your own words. Whether this means using simpler words that are easier for you to remember or finding a way to connect the new information to something you already know by using real-world examples. Third, use a variety of learning media. Another way to facilitate the transfer of learning to new contexts is to use as many different learning media as possible, from text and imagery to video and audio. Research shows that using pictures, narration, and text can help prevent your cognitive resources from becoming overloaded and improve learning transfer. One study found that learners who used relevant visuals were able to retain more information and scored higher on transfer tests than those who used only text. They also perceived the content as easier to learn when visuals were used. Even if your course doesn't have visuals or narration built into it, you can try to find ways to supplement what you're learning by using a variety of educational resources such as YouTube and TED Talks or iTunes U, edX, and Coursera. Fourth, change things up as often as possible. It's easy to get stuck in a rut with your learning by studying around the same time, in the same location, and using the same study strategies every day. But When you get used to constantly studying in the same way, it can be difficult to transfer the knowledge you acquired to new environments and situations. Research shows that organizing your learning in a more random way improves retention and transfer after, but not during the training. So, although studying in different environments and conditions may initially make it harder to remember what you're learning, in the long run, it will help you retain the information more effectively. This concept is known as desirable difficulties because although introducing certain difficulties into the learning process will initially feel uncomfortable, it is also encourages a deeper processing of materials. Fifth, identify any gaps in your knowledge. Without a complete understanding of the concept or information you're learning, transferring it to new context will be more difficult. With this in mind, it's important to identify any gaps in your knowledge and then work on strengthening your weaker areas. One excellent way to do this is through practice testing, as you'll be able to see exactly what types of questions you're constantly getting wrong and what topics you have yet to master. Similarly, practice tests will also show you which topics you have already mastered, which allows you to focus on the areas that need the most work. Sixth, establish clear learning goals. Establishing clear learning goals will give you a better understanding of what you're trying to get out of your learning and how you might later transfer that knowledge and apply it in your work or personal life. You know what the expected learning outcomes are, you'll also be able to focus on the right material. When setting learning goals, it's better to be specific rather than general so you'll be able to measure your progress as you go along. But make sure your goals are realistic too. For example, if you're learning a new language, making it your goal to be fluent within 1 month is not very realistic. Making it your goal to learn the vocabulary and phrases necessary to go shopping or eat out at a restaurant is more doable, however. 7. Practice generalizing. Generalizing is the ability to transfer the knowledge or skills you gain in one setting to a new one. It's all about seeing the bigger picture and looking for more widely applicable rules, ideas, or principles. For example, a child that learns to stack wooden blocks could generalize that skill and later use it to build more elaborate creations using Lego bricks. So, when studying a new topic or concept, think about your past lessons or experiences and look for patterns and relationships. You can then determine whether these generalizations can be supported by other evidence you know of. 8. Make your learning social. If much of your learning happens when you're alone, it can help to have a chance to discuss it with others. This gives you the opportunity to explain what you're learning in your own words and apply your knowledge to new situations. Research also shows that collaborative learning promotes engagement and benefits long-term retention. Even if you're not learning on the job or in a group setting, you can try online learning tools like Twitter, Blackboard, Edmodo, Quora, and others. 9. Use analogies and metaphors. Analogies and metaphors are great for drawing on your prior knowledge or experience and making associations between seemingly unrelated ideas. So, when learning something new and trying to connect it to something you already know, it can help to think of appropriate analogies or metaphors. Analogies compare two things and show how they are similar, such as it was as light as a feather, or he was solid as a rock. While a metaphor is a figure of speech that describes something in a way that isn't literally true but helps to explain an idea or make a stronger impact, such as love is a battlefield. And find daily opportunities to apply what you've learned. Applying what you've learned at school to real-world problems takes a lot of practice. So it's important to look for opportunities to apply what you're learning in your everyday life. For example, if you have been studying a new language, make a conscious effort to remember the foreign names of different objects around the house when you get up in the morning. If you just attended a customer service training course, try to employ one of the new strategies you've learned about when dealing with customers on your first day back at work. If you are not sure to start applying what you have learned in your job or everyday life, go back and check your learning goals to remind yourself of what you set out to learn. Next is types of transfer of learning. First, positive transfer occurs when learning in one context improves performance in some other context. Second, negative transfer. It occurs when learning in one context impacts negatively on performance in another. Third, near transfer refers to transfer between very similar contexts. This is also referred to as specific transfer. Fourth, far transfer. Far transfer refers to transfer between contexts that an appearance seem remote and alien to one another. This is also called general transfer. What are the conditions and principles of transfer? The conditions factors affecting transfer of learning. First, similarity between two learning situations. The principles of transfer, the more similar the two situations are, the greater the chances that learning from one situation will be transferred to the other situation. So the implication of this is it involves in learning situation and tasks that are similar as possible to the situations where they would apply the task. Second condition or factors affecting transfer of learning is degree of meaningfulness, relevance, or relevance of learning. Principles of transfer. Meaningful learning leads to greater transfer than rote learning. So the implication is remember to provide opportunities for learners to link new material to what they learned in the past. Third condition is length of instructional time. The principles of transfer is the longer the time spent in instruction, the greater the probability of transfer. So the implication is to ensure transfer, teach a few topics in depth rather than many topics tackled in a shallow manner. Fourth conditions, variety of learning experiences. So the principles of transfer is exposure to many and varied examples and opportunities for practice encourages transfer. The implication would be illustrate new concepts and principles with a variety of examples. Plan activities that allow your learners to practice their newly learned skills. Fifth condition, context for learners' experiences. The principles of transfer. Transfer of learning is most likely to happen when learners discover that what they learned is applicable to various contexts. The implication would be relate to a topic in one subject to topics in another subject or disciplines. Relate it also to real-life situations. Sixth, focus on principles rather than tasks. The principles of transfer is principles transfer easier than facts. The implication would be zero in on principles related to each topic together with strategies based on those principles. Seventh, emphasis on metacognition. The principles of transfer. Student reflection improves transfer of learning. The implication would be encourage students to take responsibility for their own learning and to reflect on what they learned. So that's all about my discussion. So that's all about my discussion about transfer of learning. So I hope you've learned something from my discussion today.